Isra 54. 9. Noah's intoxication. Noah lived for 350 years after the flood. The account reports, candidly and honestly. Now Noah started off as a farmer and proceeded to plant a vineyard. And he began drinking of the wine and became intoxicated, and so he uncovered himself in the midst of his tent. Ge 9. 20, 21. This does not indicate that Noah was a habitual drunkard. The Bible reports this instance to give the background for the incident that accompanied it, which event had a profound effect on world history. Before the flood, Noah was not indulging in the drinking of that wicked society, which they doubtless carried to extremes of drunken revelry. Such things dulled their sensibilities and were no doubt a factor in their ignoring God's warning, taking no note until the flood came and swept them all away. Mount 24. 38, 39. Lu 17. 27. While Noah was asleep in his tent, Ham, and perhaps also his son Canaan, became implicated in some sort of disrespect for Noah. The account reads, "Finally Noah awoke from his wine and got to know what his youngest son had done to him." Generally Ham is understood to be designated here as Noah's youngest son. However, in the Bible, the expression sometimes refers to grandson, who, in this case, was Canaan. Whatever the situation, Canaan's father Ham went telling it to his two brothers instead of himself covering Noah as they did. On learning of the episode, Noah cursed Canaan and blessed Shem's God Jehovah. Ge 9. 20-27. Nimrod's rebellion. Noah was the first patriarch of the post-flood society. Ge 10. 1-32. Nevertheless, during his lifetime false religion again rose up among those under the leadership of Nimrod, as is seen in their rebellious attempt to build a tower with its top in the heavens for fear that they might be scattered over all the surface of the earth. This was in direct opposition to God's command to fill the earth, and was a rebellion also against Noah's position as God's prophet. Noah died about 2 years before the birth of Abraham. He therefore got to see Jehovah's judgment on the builders of the Tower of Babel and the scattering of those rebellious ones over the face of the earth. Noah and Shem were not involved in the tower building and consequently would not suffer confusion of their language, but would continue to speak man's original language, which God gave to Adam. Ge 9. 1, 28, 29. 11. 1-9. A prophetic pattern. The prophets Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jesus Christ as well as the apostles Peter and Paul all spoke of God's servant Noah. Noah's days are shown by Jesus and Peter to be prophetic of the presence of the Son of Man and a future day of judgment and of destruction of the ungodly men. Jehovah, in sparing Noah and his family when he destroyed that wicked world, was setting a pattern for ungodly persons of things to come. 2p3. 5-7. 2. 5, 6. Isra 54. 9. Es 14. 14, 20. Mount 24. 37-39. Heb 11. 7. 1p3. 20, 21. 2. Heb. For food according to the terms of the Mosaic Law. The 14. 5, 6. The flesh of this creature was one of the meats regularly provided for King Solomon's table. 1 Kai 4. 22, 23. Rogelim Romidal.Gelim. A town in Gilead and home of David's friend Barzillai. 2-17. 27-29. 19. 31, 32. Some geographers tentatively place Rogelim at Bersinia, about 7 kilometers 4.5 MWSW of Ibid. Wadi Urajala, near there, possibly preserves the name Rogelim. Rogar. Second listed son of Shema in the genealogy of Asher. 1ch7. 30, 34. Roll. See scroll, roll. Romamtieza Romidal.Mamtieza. The son of Heman selected by lot during David's reign to head the last of the 24 Levitical groups of musicians at the sanctuary. 1ch25. 1, 4, 5, 9, 31. Roman. Originally, and in the restrictive sense, one who lived in the city of Rome, Italy. Act 2. 10. Row 1. 7. With the expansion of the empire, the name took on broader meanings. Sometimes the Romans referred to the imperial authority that ruled. Roman procedure meant that authority's methods of rule. Joe 11. 48. Act 25. 16. 28. 17. At other times a Roman simply meant anyone having Roman citizenship, regardless of his nationality or place of birth. Act 16. 21. In the latter case one could become a Roman by purchasing citizenship, as in the instance of the military commander Claudius Lysias. Or one might be born a Roman, that is, be a Roman citizen from birth. The Apostle Paul was such a one, for although he was a Jew by nationality, and born in the Cilician city of Tarsus hundreds of miles from Italy, from birth he was a Roman. Act 21. 39. 22. 3, 25-28. 23. 26, 27. C. Citizenship. Being a Roman citizen carried with it many privileges and protections. After Macedonia was conquered in 168 BCE, Roman citizens for the most part were exempted from paying taxes. The Lex Valeria and the Lex Porcia, enacted at various times between 509 and 195 BCE, exempted Roman citizens from scourging. The Lex Valeria provided such exemption when the citizen appealed to the people. The Lex Porcia, without such appeal. At a later date, appeals o textui acute miritra longo, Romans, letter to the 820 time and place of writing. The letter was written about 56 CE from Corinth. Tertius was evidently Paul's secretary, writing at Paul's dictation. Row 16. 22. Phoebe, who lived at Cenchreae, the seaport town of Corinth about 11 kilometers 7 mi away, was possibly the carrier of the letter. Row 16. 1. Paul had not yet been to Rome, as is evident from his remarks in chapter 1, verses 9-15. Establishment of the congregation at Rome. The congregation may have been established by some of the Jews and proselytes from Rome who had visited Jerusalem on Pentecost 33 CE, had witnessed the miraculous outpouring of Holy Spirit, and had heard the speech of Peter and the other Christians gathered there. Act 2. Or others who converted to Christianity later on may have taken the good news about the Christ to Rome, for, since this great city was the center of the Roman Empire, many moved there in time, and many were the travelers and businessmen visiting there. Paul sends respectful greetings to Andronicus and Junius, his relatives and fellow captives, who were men of note among the apostles, and who has been in the service of Christ longer than Paul had. These men may well have his share in establishing the Christian congregation in Rome. Row 16. 7. At the time Paul wrote, the congregation had evidently been in existence for some time and was vigorous enough that its faith was being talked about throughout the whole world. Row 1. 8. Purpose of the letter. It becomes clear in reading the letter that it was written to a Christian congregation composed of both Jews and Gentiles. There were many Jews in Rome at the time. They returned after the death of Emperor, a letter explaining that righteousness comes, not as a result of ancestry or through works of the Mosaic law, but through faith in Jesus Christ, and as a result of God's undeserved kindness, written about 56 CE, some 20 years after the first Gentiles became Christians. Righteousness is through faith in Christ, and as a result of God's undeserved kindness. 1. 11. 36. Faith is essential for salvation. The scripture says, the righteous one. By means of faith he will live. The Jews, although highly favored by God, have not been able to attain to righteousness by means of the law. Jews as well as non-Jews are under sin. There is not a righteous man, not even one by God's undeserved kindness. Both Jews and non-Jews can be declared righteous as a free gift through faith, just as Abraham was counted righteous as a result of faith. Even before he was circumcised, men inherit sin and death from one man, Adam. Through one man, Jesus, many sinners are declared righteous. This does not give a license to sin. Any remaining slaves to sin are not slaves of righteousness. Those formerly under the law are made dead to the law through Christ's body. They must walk in harmony with the Spirit, putting sinful practices of the body to death. The law served the purpose of making sin by the Bible writers, may mean the expansive atmosphere that surrounds the earth in which clouds float. Isla 45. 8. or it may mean the apparent vault or dome over the earth that is blue in the daytime and star-studded at night. PS 89. 37. In most cases the writer evidently is merely referring to what is high above man without specifying which aspect of the sky is involved. PS 57. 10. 108. 4. The fine dust particles in the atmosphere, the molecules of water vapor, and, to some extent, the molecules of other gases in the atmosphere, such as oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide, scatter the rays of light, the blue rays being most diffused, which gives the clear sky its characteristic blue color. Fine dust particles also play a large part in producing clouds, the water vapor collecting around these particles. The Hebrew word shachak sky is also translated film of dust, cloud, cloudy sky. It is apparently from a root meaning pound fine. Tusa 22. 43. Jehovah speaks of himself as the one who beat out the skies hard like a molten mirror. Job 37. 18. The particles forming the atmosphere are indeed compressed under the pull of gravity, and their outer limits are within set boundaries, gravity preventing their escape from the earth. G1. 6-8. They do reflect the sunlight in a manner comparable to a mirror. Because of this the sky looks bright, whereas without an atmosphere an observer on the earth would see only blackness in the sky, with the heavenly bodies glowing brilliantly on a black background, as is the case with the atmosphereless moon. Astronauts can observe the Earth's atmosphere from outer space as an illuminated, glowing halo. Jehovah used figurative language in warning Israel that, for disobedience, the skies overhead would become copper and the earth beneath, iron, and powder and dust would be the rain of their land. Doubtless under such conditions of lack of rain the shut-up, cloudless skies would become reddish, copper, in color, because increased dust particles in the atmosphere tend to diffuse the blue light to the point that the red waves are more prominent, just as the setting sun appears red, because of the greater depth or thickness of atmosphere that the sun's rays must traverse. De 28. 23, 24. Compare 1 Chi 8. 35, where heaven is used as referring to the expanse. Another Hebrew word occasionally rendered skies is Mayim heavens. De 28. 23. Similarly, the Greek Ra numbers, literally heaven, is also translated sky. When Jesus ascended toward heaven, a cloud caught him away from the disciples' vision. As they gazed into the sky, angels appeared and said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the sky? This Jesus who was received up from you into the sky will come thus in the same manner as you have beheld him going into the sky." Act 1. 9-11, FTN. The angels, in effect, told the disciples that there was no point in their gazing into the sky, expecting him to appear to their vision there. For the cloud had caught him up, and he had become invisible. But he would come back in like manner, invisibly, unobserved by their physical eyes. Occasionally, sky is used in parallel with heaven. See heaven. Slander. See gossip, slander. Slap. See attitudes and gestures. Slave. The original language words rendered o textoi acute muritra longo, slave 978 God's servant, an example being King Nebuchadnezzar. J 27. 6. The Greek term doulos corresponds to the Hebrew word evedh. It is used with reference to persons owned by fellowmen. Mount 8. 9. 10. 24, 25. 13. 27. Devoted servants of God and of his Son Jesus Christ, with a human act 2. 18. 4. 29. Row 1. 1. Go 1. 10 or angelic ray 19. 10, where the word sin-do lost fellow slave appears. And, in a figurative sense, to persons in slavery to sin. 8. 34. Row 6. 16-20 or corruption 2 pe2. 19. The Hebrew word na'ah, like the Greek term pays, basically means a boy or a youth and can also designate a servant or an attendant. Once a 1. 24. 4. 21. 30. 17. 2 Chi 5. 20. Mount 2. 16, 8, 6, 17, 18, 21, 15. Act 20. 12. The Greek term oimiddle.kets denotes a house servant or slave. Lu 16. 13. And a female slave or servant is designated by the Greek word pymiddle.diske. Lu 12. 45. The participial form of the Hebrew root shamiddle.wrath may be rendered by such terms as minister x 33. 11. Or waiter. 2. 13. 18. The Greek word high-middle.p-middle.rtes may be translated attendant, court attendant, or house attendant. Mount 26. 58. Mr. 14. 54, 65. Joe 18. 36. The Greek term the middle.rapon occurs solely at Hebrews 3. With the power to speak new languages did not forget their original tongue, Hebrew. God's Spirit here was also affecting a very different purpose, not of confusing and scattering, but of enlightening and drawing together persons of honest heart into Christian unity. Act 2. 1-21, 37-42. From then on God's covenant people were a multilingual people, but the barrier created by language difference was overcome because their minds were filled with the common or mutual language of the truth. In unity they spoke in praise of Jehovah and his righteous purposes by Christ Jesus. Thus, the promise at Zephaniah 3:9 saw a fulfillment as Jehovah God gave peoples the change to a pure language, in order for them all to call upon the name of Jehovah, in order to serve him shoulder to shoulder. Compare Issa 66. 18. Zakat 23. Re 7. 4, 9, 10. For this to be so, they should all speak in agreement and be fitly united in the same mind and in the same line of thought. 1 Co 1. 10. The purity of the language spoken by the Christian congregation was also because of its being free from words expressing malicious bitterness, anger, wrath, screaming, and similar abusive language, as well as being free from deceit, obscenity, and corruptness. F4. 29, 31. 1 P 3. 10 Christians were to put language to its most exalted use, praising their Creator and upbuilding their neighbor with wholesome, truthful speech, especially the good news about God's kingdom. Mount 24. 14. Tip 2. 7, 8. Heb 13. 15. Compare PS 51. 15. 109. 30. As the time neared for God to execute his judicial decision upon all the nations of the world, Jehovah would enable many more to speak that pure language. The Bible began to be written in the Hebrew language, and some portions were later recorded in Aramaic. Then, in the 1st century of the Common Era, the remainder of the sacred scriptures were written in Koine, or Common Greek, though Matthew wrote his Gospel first in Hebrew. By then a translation had also been made of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. Called the Septuagint, it was not an inspired translation but, nevertheless, was used by the Christian writers of the Bible in numerous quotations. See inspiration. So, too, the Christian Greek scriptures and eventually the whole Bible came to be translated into other languages, among the earliest being Latin, Syriac, Ethiopic, Arabic, and Persian. As of the present time, the Bible, the whole or in part, is available in well over 3,000 languages. This has facilitated the proclamation of the good news and o text to acute miritra longo. Last days 205. This city had a major disadvantage. Unlike the nearby city of Hierapolis, with its hot springs famed for their healing properties, and Colossae, with its refreshing cold water, Laodicea had no permanent water supply. From a considerable distance away, water had to be piped to Laodicea and likely was lukewarm on reaching the city. For the initial part of the distance the water was conveyed by means of an aqueduct and then, closer to the city, through cubical stone blocks that were bored through the middle and cemented together. Laodicea seems to have had a considerable number of Jews. According to a letter from Laodicean magistrates as quoted by Josephus, the Jews, in compliance with the injunction of Gaius Rabirius, were allowed to observe their Sabbaths and other sacred rites. Jewish Antiquities, 14, 241-243x, 20. At least some of the Jews there were quite wealthy. This may be deduced from the fact that, when Governor Flaccus ordered the confiscation of the annual contributions that were meant for the temple at Jerusalem, the amount reportedly was found to be more than 20 pounds of gold. In the 1st century CE, a Christian congregation existed at Laodicea and apparently met in the home of Nympha, a Christian sister there. Doubtless the efforts of Epaphras contributed to the establishment of that congregation. Col 4. 12, 13, 15 Also, the effects of Paul's work at Ephesus likely reached as far as Laodicea. Act 19. 10 Although not ministering there personally, Paul was nevertheless concerned about the Laodicean congregation and even wrote a letter to them. Col 2. 1. 4. 16 However, some scholars believe that Paul's letter may have been simply a duplicate of the one he sent to Ephesus. Of course, that is only a theory, an effort to account for the fact that the Bible contains no letter from Paul to the Laodiceans, although Paul wrote to them. The letter to Laodicea may simply have contained information not necessary for us today, or it may have repeated points adequately covered in other canonical letters. The congregation at Laodicea was one of the 7 in Asia Minor to which the glorified Jesus Christ, in a revelation to John, addressed personal messages. Re 1. 11 At that time, toward the close of the 1st century CE, the Laodicean congregation had little to commend it. Though materially rich, it was spiritually poor. Instead of the literal gold handled by the Laodicean bankers, instead of the garments of glossy black wool made locally, instead of the eye medicine doubtless produced by the Laodicean medical profession, instead of the boiling hot medicinal waters from the springs of nearby Hierapolis, the Laodicean congregation needed things like these in a spiritual sense. It needed gold refined by fire to enrich its personality. Compare 1 Co 3. 10-14. 1 P1. 6, 7. White outer garments to give it an irreproachable Christian appearance with no unchristian features that were as shameful as bodily naked. 29-31. That the faith of others was not an absolute essential for Jesus to perform miraculous acts can be seen in his healing the severed ear of the high priest's slave, part of the crowd that came to arrest Jesus. Luke 22. 50, 51. The resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead to spirit life was the greatest demonstration ever of God's power. Without it, Christian faith would be in vain, his followers would be of all men most to be pitied. 1 Co 15. 12-19 It was the act most consistently recounted by Jesus' disciples and the greatest single factor in strengthening faith. Distance had not hindered Jesus' exercise of power when on earth. Mount 8. 5-13. Job 4. 46-53, and now, from his heavenly position, Jesus anointed his followers with God's Spirit on Pentecost, enabling them to do powerful works in his absence. He thereby authenticated their testimony concerning his resurrection. Act 4. 33. Heb 2. 3, 4 And also gave proof that these were God's approved people, his congregation. Act 2. 1-4, 14-36, 43. 3. 11-18. The death of his son as a human had not shortened Jehovah's hand, as the many miracles, signs, and portents performed by the apostles and others testified. Act 4. 29, 30. 6. 8. 14. 3. 19. 11. 12 The powerful works they performed were like those of their master, healing the lame. Act 3. 1-9. 14. 8-10 and Act 5. 12-16. 28. 7-9, Raising the Dead. Act 9. 36-41. 20. 9-11, Casting out demons. Act 8. 6, 7. 16. 16-18, doing so without seeking personal benefit or honor for themselves. Act 3. 12. 8. 9-24. 13. 15-17 Through them God expressed judgments against wrongdoers, even as he had done through the earlier prophets, fostering due respect toward himself and his representatives. Act 5. 1-11. 13. 8-12 New abilities were granted them, such as the ability to speak in foreign languages and interpret them. This, too, was for a beneficial purpose, for they were soon to extend the preaching work beyond Israel, telling Jehovah's wonderful works among the nations. 1 Co 12. 4-11. PS 96. 3, 7. Jehovah God did other powerful things as well, opening up doors of opportunity for them to preach in certain territories, protecting them against those who would shut down their ministerial work, directing their activity, doing so in ways generally unobserved by the public. Act 5. 17-20. 8. 26-29, 39, 40. 9. 1-8. 10. 19-22, 44-48. 12. 6-11. 13. 2. 16. 6-10, 25-33. 18. 9, 10. 1 Co 16. 8, 9. It was foretold that miraculous abilities granted by the Spirit to the apostles, and passed on by them to others, would last only during the infancy of the Christian congregation, thereafter ending. 1 Co 13. 8-11. See Gifts from God, Gifts of the Spirit. M. Clintock and Strong's Cyclopedia Volume 6, p. 320 says that it is an uncontested statement that during the first 100 years after the death of the apostles we hear O textoi acute miritra longo, praise 666 constitute a powerful political force in the supporting or overthrowing of an emperor. Eventually the men from the provinces were admitted into the Praetorian Guard. It was finally abolished by Emperor Constantine in 312 CE in the Gospels and Acts. The Latinism primidal.terrain is used with regard to a palace or residence. The tent of an army commander had been known as praetorium, and so, in time, the term was applied to the residence of a provincial governor. Thus Pilate interrogated Jesus in the praetorium, or governor's palace. Joe 18. 28, 33. 19. 9. See Governor's Palace. Evidently there, judgments were rendered and troops were barracked. Mount 27. 27. Mr. 15. 16 at Caesarea, Paul was kept under guard in the Praetorian Palace of Herod. Act 23. 35. In view of this usage, some have suggested that primidal.terrain at Philippians 1. 13 applied to Nero's palace on Palatine Hill or to a judgment hall where Paul's case might be heard. However, the Cyclopedia by M. Clintock and Strong Volume 8, p. 469 points out it was not the imperial palace. For this was never called Praetorium in Rome. Nor was it the judgment hall, for no such building stood in Rome, and the name Praetor had chastised the Israelites with whips, he would do so with scourges. Hobome's expression was figurative, but the scourges alluded to may have been lashes equipped with sharp points, since the Hebrew word akmiddle.rab-middle.bin for scourges literally means scorpions. 1 Chi 12. 11, 14, ftn. 2 ch 10. 11, 14. Eliphaz the Temanite spoke of the whip of a tongue. Job 4. 1. 5. 21 Apparently the allusion was to the use of the tongue to inflict injury, as in slandering and speaking abusively. Compare textoi acute miritra longo, widow 1181 or worthless in a physical sense, as when Jesus Christ spoke of worthless fruit. Mount 7. 17, 18 This word can also describe something that is hurtful and, at Revelation 16. 2, has been rendered painful at, deaf and malignant. N.W. Why has God committed wickedness? Satan the devil, who caused the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, to rebel against God, stands in opposition to God's righteous standard and is appropriately termed the wicked one. Mount 6. 13. 13. 19, 38. 1 Joe 2. 13, 14. 5. 19 The rebellion initiated by Satan called into question the rightfulness and righteousness of God's sovereignty, that is, whether God's rulership over his creatures is exercised righteously and in their best interests. The fact that Adam and Eve rebelled also raised another issue. would all other intelligent creatures prove unfaithful and disloyal to God when obedience appeared to bring no material benefits. Satan's claim respecting faithful Job implied that they would do so. Satan said, "Skin in behalf of skin, and everything that a man has he will give in behalf of his soul. For a change, thrust out your hand, please, and touch as far as his bone and his flesh, and see whether he will not curse you to your very face." Job 2. 4, 5. See sovereignty. Time was required to settle the issues that had been raised. Hence, Jehovah God, by permitting wicked persons to continue living, made it possible for others to share in proving Satan's claim false by serving God faithfully under unfavorable and trialsome circumstances. God's permission of wickedness has also provided an opportunity for individuals to abandon a wrong course and to subject themselves willingly to God's righteous laws. Isra 55. 7. S 33. 11. So God's holding back for a time from destroying the wicked serves to spare the righteously disposed ones by allowing time for them to prove their love and devotion to Jehovah. Row 9. 17-26. Additionally, Jehovah God makes use of circumstances in such a way that the wicked themselves unwittingly serve his purpose. Though they oppose God, he can restrain them to the extent necessary for the preserving of his servants in their integrity, and can cause the actions even of such persons to bring his righteousness to the fore. Row 3. 3-5, 23-26. 8. 35-39. PS 76. 10. This thought is expressed at Proverbs 16. 4. Everything Jehovah has made for his purpose, yes, even the wicked one for the evil day. A case in point is the Pharaoh on whom Jehovah, through Moses and Aaron, served notice for the release of the enslaved Israelites. God did not make this Egyptian ruler wicked, but he did allow him to continue living and also brought about circumstances that caused Pharaoh to manifest himself as being wicked and deserving of death. Jehovah's purpose in doing this is revealed at Exodus 9. 16. For this cause I have kept you in existence, for the sake of showing you my power and in order to have my name declared in all the earth. The 10 plagues visited upon Egypt, climaxed by the destruction of Pharaoh and his military forces in the Red Sea, were an impressive demonstration of Jehovah's power. Acts 7. 14. 12. 30. PS 78. 43-51. 136. 15. For years afterward the nations round about were still talking about it, and God's name was thus being declared throughout the earth. Jos 2. 10, 11. Once a 4. 8. Had Jehovah killed Pharaoh immediately, this grand display of God's power to his glory and for the deliverance of his people would not have been possible. The scriptures give assurance that the time will come when wickedness will no longer exist, as all those who stand in opposition to the Creator will be destroyed when his permission of wickedness will have served its purpose. O texto e acute miritra longo, wife 1182. Concern of Jehovah and Christ for widows. Jehovah spoke of himself as the one executing judgment for the fatherless boy and the widow. The 10. 18 strong injunctions are given in the law as to the administration of full and equal justice to widows. Acts 22. 22-24. The 24. 17. A curse was pronounced upon those perverting the judgment of widows. The 27. 19. And proper treatment of widows was urged in the writings of the prophets. Issa 1. 17, 23. 10. 1, 2. J 22. 3. S 22, 6. 2. A prince in the delegation King Zedekiah sent to inquire of Jeremiah concerning the future of Jerusalem. J 21. 1, 2. Pasha also petitioned the king for Jeremiah to be put to death. J 38. 1, 4, 6. Pasha is called in these two passages the son of Malchijah. The family of priests returning from Babylonian exile contains a similar link in their genealogy, Pasha the son of Malchijah. 1 Ch 9. 12. Any 11. 12. If Prince Pasha was indeed a priest, he may be the one from whom the sons of Pasha know. 4. Draw their name. 3. A priest, the son or descendant of Immer. The leading commissioner in the house of Jehovah. Pasha, objecting to Jeremiah's prophecies, struck him on, put him into the stocks, and released him the following day. As a result, Jehovah, through Jeremiah, foretold exile and death in Babylon for Pasha and, accordingly, changed his name from Pasha-Otex to Akut-Miritra Longo, Passover 581 within the months March-April of the Gregorian calendar. Passover was followed by 7 days of the Festival of Unfermented Cakes, Nisan 15-21. Passover commemorates the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt and the passing over of their firstborn, when Jehovah destroyed the firstborn of Egypt. Seasonally, it fell at the beginning of the barley harvest. X 12. 14, 24-47. La 23. 10. Passover was a memorial celebration. Therefore the scriptural command was, "And it must occur that when your sons say to you, 'What does this service mean to you?' then you must say, 'It is the sacrifice of the Passover to Jehovah, who passed over the houses of the sons of Israel in Egypt when he plagued the Egyptians, but he delivered our houses.'" X 12. 26, 27. Since the Jews reckoned the day as starting after sundown and ending the next day at sundown, Nisan 14 would begin after sundown. It would be in the evening after Nisan 13 concluded that the Passover would be observed. Since the Bible definitely states that Christ is the Passover sacrifice 1 Co 5. 7 and that he observed the Passover meal the evening before he was put to death, the date of his death would be Nisan 14, not Nisan 15, in order to fulfill accurately the time feature of the type, or shadow, provided in the law. Heb 10. 1. Laws governing its observance. Each household was to choose a male sheep or goat that was sound and a year old. It was taken into the house on the 10th day of the month Abib and kept until the 14th, and then it was slaughtered and its blood was splashed with a bunch of hyssop on the doorposts and the upper part of the doorway of the dwelling in which they were to eat it, not on the threshold where the blood would be trampled on. The lamb or goat was slaughtered, skinned, its interior parts cleansed and replaced, and it was roasted whole, well done, with no bones broken. 2ch 35. 11. New 9. 12. If the household was too small to consume the whole animal, then it was to be shared with a neighbor household and eaten that same night. Anything left over was to be burned before morning. X 12. 10. 34. 25. It was eaten with unfermented cakes, the bread of affliction, and with bitter greens, for their life had been bitter under slavery. X 1. 14. 12. 1-11, 29, 34. La 16. 3. What is meant by the expression between the two evenings? The Israelites measured their day from sundown to sundown. So Passover day would begin at sundown at the end of the 13th day of Abib Nisan. The animal was to be slaughtered between the two evenings. X 12. 6. There are differences of opinion as to the exact time meant. According to some scholars, as well as the correct Jews and Samaritans, this is the time between sunset and deep twilight. On the other hand, the Pharisees and the Rabbinists considered the first evening to be when the sun began to descend and the second evening to be the real sunset. Due to this latter view, the rabbis hold that the lamb was slaughtered in the latter part of the 14th, not at its start, and therefore that the Passover meal was actually eaten on Nisan 15. On this point Professors Kiel and Delitzsch say, different opinions have prevailed among the Jews from a very early date as to the precise time intended. Aben Ezra agrees with the Karaites and Samaritans in taking the first evening to be the time when the sun sinks below the horizon, and the second the time of total darkness. In which case, between the two evenings would be from 6 o'clock to 7:20. According to the rabbinical idea, the time when the sun began to descend, viz. from 3 to 5 o'clock, was the first evening, and sunset the second. So that between the two evenings was from 3 to 6 Otex to Akut Miritra Longo, Passover 582. At the Passover in Egypt, the head of the family was responsible for the slaying of the lamb or goat at each home, and all were to stay inside the house to avoid being slain by the angel. The partakers ate in a standing position, their hips girded, staff in hand, sandals on so as to be ready for a long journey over rough ground, whereas they often did their daily work barefoot. At midnight all the firstborn of the Egyptians were slain, but the angel passed over the houses on which the blood had been spattered. X 12. 11. 23 Every Egyptian household in which there was a firstborn male. 2 First-century Christians are spoken of as being sealed by means of Holy Spirit, which is an advance token of their heavenly inheritance. F1. 13, 14. 4. 30 The seal signifies their being God's possession. 2 Co 1. 21, 22 and shows that they are truly in line for heavenly life. The Book of Revelation shows the number finally sealed to be 144,000. Re 7. 2-4. 9. 4. The Bible speaks of something that is closed, hidden, or secret as being sealed. Prophetic messages were sealed during the time they were not understood. Da 12. 4, 9. Re 5. 1. 22. 10. Compare Isla 8. 16. 29. 11. And Jehovah is said to put a seal around stars, evidently meaning that he hides them from view by means of clouds. Job 9. 7. Sealskin. There is uncertainty as to the particular kind of skin referred to as tarshash. This Hebrew word is used in describing the outer cover of the tabernacle or textoi acute muritra longo. See Monster 884 who considered the Septuagint reading to be simply conjecture, a rendering having the support neither of etymology nor of related languages. He understood tarshash to mean either the seal or the badger, basing his conclusions on the context, the authority of the Talmudists, a comparison of the Hebrew word with similar words in other languages, and Hebrew etymology. Bible translators have variously rendered wrote tarshash shimmer's badger's skin skj, goat skin srs, porpoise skin at, seal skin as, leather mo, fine leather jb, violet skin dye, and trahash leather nw, x25. 5, ftn, but sealskins in main text. The rendering badger's skin is not generally favored by scholars, since it is thought unlikely that the Israelites would have been able to procure enough badger skins, either in Egypt or in the wilderness, for covering the tabernacle. There are also scholars who consider neither badger's skin nor sealskin nor porpoise skin to be correct, in view of the fact that badgers, seals, porpoises or dolphins, dugongs, and similar creatures were evidently unclean for food. Law 11. 12, 27 They therefore find it hard to conceive that the skin of an unclean animal would have been used for something so sacred as the construction of the tabernacle and as a protective covering for the furnishings and utensils of the sanctuary. Those taking this view suggest that tarshash may designate the skin of a clean animal, possibly of a kind of antelope, sheep, or goat. Usable, though seal classed as unclean. The fact that seals were evidently unclean for food would not necessarily rule out using their skins as a covering for the tabernacle. For instance, whereas the lion and the eagle were unclean. Or 11. 13, 27, the heavenly cherubs seen by Ezekiel in vision were depicted with 4 faces, including that of a lion and of an eagle. As 1. 5, 10. 10. 14 Also. The copper carriages that Solomon made for temple use were adorned with representations of lions, and this undoubtedly according to the plans given to David by divine inspiration. 1 Kai 7. 27-29. 1 Ch 28. 11-19 The Israelites used unclean animals, such as asses, for mounts, it even being foretold that the Messiah would ride into Jerusalem upon an ass. Zech 9. 9. Mount 21. 4, 5 Although John the Baptist had a most sacred commission to go in advance before Jehovah to make his ways ready, he wore clothing made from the hair of an unclean animal. Lu 1. 76. Mount 3. 4. Law 11. For all of this tends to indicate that the distinction between clean and unclean was simply dietary, though at times it was also used with reference to sacrifice, and did not require that the Israelites regard unclean animals with general abhorrence. Law 11. 46, 47 Also, these, like the clean animals, were created by God and were therefore good, not loathsome in themselves. Ge 1. 21, 25. How obtainable by Israelites? If the tar-chash of the Bible does designate a kind of seal, then a question may arise as to how it was possible for the Israelites to obtain sealskins. While seals are generally associated with Arctic and Antarctic regions, some seals favor warmer climates. Today a few monk seals still inhabit part of the Mediterranean Sea, as well as other warmer waters. Over the centuries man has greatly reduced the number of seals, and in Bible times these animals may have been abundant in the Mediterranean and in the Red Sea. As late as 1832 an English edition of Carmet's Dictionary of the Holy Bible p. 139 observed, "On many of the small islands of the Red Sea, around the peninsula of Sinai, are found seals." See also The Tabernacle's Typical Teaching, by A. J. Pollock, London, p. 47. The ancient Egyptians engaged in commerce on the Red Sea and, of course, received goods from many of the Mediterranean regions. So the Egyptians would have had access to sealskins. Hence, O textoi acute miritra longo, secretaries inclone 885 certain kind of weather prevails. A suitable or appointed time for something. As the earth revolves around the sun, it had a door at the top for depositing grain by ascending a ladder and small sliding doors at ground level for its removal. Underground granaries have also long been used in the Middle East, these evidently being preferred in sparsely populated areas, because they are concealed from marauders. Illustrative use. Jesus Christ, in urging his disciples not to be anxious about material needs, but to seek only their bread for this day, reminded them that God feeds the birds, though they do not gather things into storehouses or barns. Mount 6. 11, 25, 26. Luke 12. 22, 24 To show that life does not result from the things one possesses, Jesus gave an illustration of a rich man who considered replacing his storehouses with bigger ones to hold his many goods, only to face death. His material riches therefore were of no benefit to him. Luke 12. 13-21. Instead of encouraging us to look to earthly goods and accordingly build up a great store of them, the wise writer of Proverbs says, "Honor Jehovah with your valuable things. Then your stores of supply will be filled with plenty." PR 3. 9, 10 It was exemplified in the experience of the nation of Israel, which, when obediently serving Jehovah and bringing full tithes to the sanctuary, was blessed with abundance. De 28. 1, 8. 1 Chi 4. 20. 2 Ch 31. 4-10. Mal 3. 10 Apparently King David referred to such material blessings for obedience at Psalm 144. 13-15. After rescuing David and his people and giving them victory over their enemies, Jehovah's blessing would include filling their storehouses with produce and giving them material prosperity. Showing that Jehovah was the true source of their prosperity and happiness, David concludes this psalm with the words, "Happy is the people whose God is Jehovah." Figurative use. John the Baptizer warned the Pharisees and Sadducees of their dangerous situation, likening truly repentant ones to wheat to be gathered, but comparing those leaders to chaff. He said to them, "The one coming after me will gather his wheat into the storehouse, but the chaff he will burn up with fire that cannot be put out." Mount 3. 7-12. Luke 3. 16, 17 Jesus foretold a harvest, which he equated with the conclusion of a system of things and in which angelic reapers would gather symbolic weeds to be burned, whereas the wheat would be gathered into God's storehouse, the restored Christian congregation, where they would have God's favor and protection. Mount 13. 24-30, 36-43. Jehovah speaks of things around which he has put boundaries by means of created forces, or natural laws, as well as of things he has reserved under his control for special purposes, as being in storehouses. The sea is said to be gathered like a dam, put in storehouses. PS 33. 7 Also of other natural phenomena that he has at times used against his enemies, he asked Job, "Have you entered into the storehouses of the snow, or do you see even the storehouses of the hail, which I have kept back for the time of distress, for the day of fight and war?" Job 38. 22, 23. Compare Jaws 10. 8-11. JG 5. 20, 21. PS 105. 32. 135. 7. Even the armies of the Medes and Persians under King Cyrus were included by Jehovah among the weapons of his denunciation brought out of his storehouse against Babylon. J 50. 25, 26. Storkheb. Chasey middle dot da. The name of this bird O textoi acute muritra longo, street 1039 know their appointed times. J 8. 7. The stork regularly migrates through Palestine and Syria from its winter quarters in Africa, appearing in large flocks during March and April. Of the two kinds of storks found in Israel, the white stork and the black stork Ciconia nigra, the former only occasionally remains to breed in that region, usually making its nest in trees, but also on man-made structures. The black stork, so named for its black head, neck, and back, is more common in the Hula and Bet-Shean valleys, and it seeks trees, where available, to build its nest. The psalmist referred to the storks nesting in the tall juniper trees. PS 104. 17. Contrasting the flightless ostrich with the high-flying stork, Jehovah asked Job, "Has the wing of the female ostrich flapped joyously, or has she the pinions of a stork and the plumage?" Job 39. 13. The stork's pinions are of great breadth and power, the secondary and tertiary feathers being almost as long as the primaries, giving an immense surface to the wing and enabling the stork to be a bird of lofty and long-continued flight. A stork in flight soaring on its powerful wings, with its neck extended and its long legs stretched out straight behind it, makes an imposing sight. The two women seen in Zechariah's vision Zech 5. 6-11 carrying an ephah measure containing the woman called wickedness are described as having wings like the wings of the stork. The reference to the wind in their wings verses 9 harmonizes also with the rushing sound produced by the air passing through the stork's pinions. The primary feathers are fingered out in flight so that slots are formed at the ends of the wings, thereby controlling the airflow over the top of the wings and improving their lifting power. Straight. 7-11. 2. 3-5 What if he had put Adam, Eve, and Satan to death at the time of the rebellion? Some might have concluded that Satan had a point in his challenge. But by long suffering, Jehovah gave men the opportunity to prove under test that they prefer his sovereignty over them and that they want to serve him because of his fine qualities, yes, to demonstrate that they prefer Jehovah's sovereignty to complete independence, knowing that it is far better. PS 84. 10. Jesus Christ, because of long suffering in obedience to God, received a most marvelous reward, being exalted to the superior position of kingship and being given the name that is above every other name, by his Father. PHP 2. 5-11 Besides this, he receives a bride made up of his spiritual brothers, the New Jerusalem, which is represented as a city, the foundation stones of which have on them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. O textoi acute muritra longo, Lord 265 trees. Loose conduct. All these wicked things issue forth from within and defile a man. Mr. 7. 20-23 Loose conduct is one of the works of the flesh, one of the fleshly desires that carry on a conflict against the soul. Those who practice such things will not inherit God's kingdom, says God's word. 5. 19, 21. 1 Pe 2. 11. Christians loving the light of truth are told, as in the daytime let us walk decently, not in revelries and drunken bouts, not in illicit intercourse and loose conduct. Row 13. 13. Joe 3. 19-21 The Apostle Peter argues, for the time that has passed by before becoming servants of God is sufficient for you to have worked out the will of the nations when you proceeded in deeds of loose conduct. 1 Pe 4. 3 The Apostle Paul likewise admonishes Christians, describing the course of worldly nations with whom they formerly associated as in darkness mentally, and alienated from the life that belongs to God. Having come to be past all moral sense, they gave themselves over to loose conduct to work uncleanness of every sort with greediness. F4. 17-19. Nevertheless, some claiming to be servants of God in Christ turn from the way of light and display a brazen, defiant attitude toward divine law and authority. Paul was grieved by those in the Corinthian congregation who had not repented of the uncleanness and fornication and loose conduct that they had practiced, in spite of admonition to the contrary. 2 Cor 12. 21 Peter warned the early Christians that false teachers would come from among their own ranks, and that many would follow their acts of loose conduct, bringing reproach upon the way of truth. 2 Peter 2. 1, 2 Jesus' words to the congregations in Pergamum and Thyatira, written down by the Apostle John about 96 CE, indicate that Peter's prophecy was to some extent having fulfillment at that time. Read 2. 12, 14, 18, 20 Both Peter and Jude express the judgment coming on practices of loose conduct. 2 Peter 2. 17-22. Jude 7. The argument of some practices of loose conduct in their attempt to entice and deceive others in the Christian congregation is that God's undeserved kindness is great and that he will overlook their sins, since he recognizes their imperfections and fleshly weakness. But Jesus' half-brother Jude spoke of such as being ungodly men, turning the undeserved kindness of our God into an excuse for loose conduct and proving false to our only honor and Lord, Jesus Christ. Jude, for such one's profession of Christianity is meaningless. Their service is unacceptable to God. It is as the wise writer of Israel said, "The sacrifice of the wicked ones is something detestable. How much more so when one brings it along with loose conduct." PR 21. 27. Under the law, the same viewpoint was expressed against loose conduct. God has not changed on this matter. Loose conduct was legislated against, and the penalty was death. Law 18. 17. 20. 14 David appealed to God not to take his life away with blood-guilty men, in whose hands there is loose conduct. PS 26. 9, 10. Through his prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel, Jehovah warned Israel of his judgments against them for loose conduct practiced both in a physical and a spiritual way. Jer 13. 26, 27. Es 16. 27, 43, 58. 22. 9. 23. 21-49. 24. 13. Lord. The Greek and Hebrew words rendered Lord or such related terms as Sir, Owner, Master are used with reference to Jehovah God as 3. 11. Jesus Christ Mount 7. 21. One of the elders seen by John in Visionary 7. 13, 14. Angels GE 19. 1, 2. Dar 12. 8. Men 1 Sir 25. 24. Acts 16. 16, 19, 30, and false deities 1 Co 8. 5. Often the designation Lord denotes one who has ownership or authority and power over persons or things. GE 20 only to Quirinius. Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, edited by H. Dessau, Berlin, 1887, Volume 14, p. 397, no. 3613. It contains the statement that on going to Syria he became governor or legate for the second time. On the basis of inscriptions found in Antioch containing Quirinius' name, many historians acknowledge that Quirinius was also governor of Syria in the BCE period. There is uncertainty on their part, however, as to where Quirinius fits among the secularly recorded governors of Syria. Josephus lists Quintilius Varus as governor of Syria at the time of, and subsequent to, the death of Herod the Great. Jewish Antiquities, 17, 89 v. 2. 17, 221 9. 3 Tacitus also refers to Varus as being governor at the time of Herod's death. The Histories, v. 9 Josephus states that Varus' predecessor was Saturninus C. Sentius Saturninus. Many scholars, in view of the evidence of an earlier governorship by Quirinius, suggest the years 3-2 BCE for his governorship. While these dates would harmonize satisfactorily with the biblical record, the basis on which these scholars select them is in error. That is, they list Quirinius as governor during those years, because they place his rule after that of Varus, and hence after the death of Herod the Great, for which they use the popular but erroneous date of 4 BCE. See chronology. Herod number 1 date of his death. For the same reason, that is, their use of the unproved date 4 BCE for Herod's death, they give the Rus governorship as from 6 to 4 BCE. The length of his rule, however, is conjectural, for Josephus does not specify the date of its